At 7:42 a.m. on August 17, 1943, Technical Sergeant James McKenna crouched under the left wing of AP-38 Lightning at Dobodura airfield in New Guinea, his eyes fixed on the pilot preparing for a mission he probably wouldn't survive. The morning air was thick with the scent of fuel and humidity, the low hum of distant engines signaling the start of another perilous day. The pilot was Lieutenant Robert Hayes, 23 years old, a farm kid from Iowa, with 6 combat missions under his belt and 0 kills. The Japanese had sent 18 Mitsubishi A6M0 fighters to intercept the morning patrol. Hayes would be flying straight into them. McKenna had been maintaining P-38s for 8 months. He knew every bolt, every wire, every subtle quirk of the twin-engine fighter. Twin-engine, twin-boom design, fast in a straight line, a beast at high altitude. But it had one fatal flaw that was killing American pilots daily. It couldn't outturn a Zero. The Japanese fighter was lighter, more agile, capable of a full horizontal turn in half the time a P-38 needed in a dogfight. That split-second difference was a death sentence. American doctrine dictated that P-38 pilots should never attempt to outmaneuver a Zero, never engage in turning fights. Speed and altitude were their allies. Dive in, shoot, climb out, hit and run. Avoid getting caught in a horizontal duel. Hayes had tried to follow this doctrine 5 times. It hadn't worked. The Zeros were too clever, baiting pilots into turns, cutting inside their turning radius, getting on their tails, shooting them down. In the previous 6 weeks, the 5th Air Force had lost 37 P-38s, most after being trapped in turning engagements they couldn't escape. McKenna had watched too many pilots die. Good men, young men, kids really. They climbed into their P-38s full of confidence and returned in boxes, or didn't return at all. The manuals blamed pilot error. Instructors insisted these men weren't following doctrine. But McKenna knew better. It wasn't the pilot's fault. The problem lay in the control cables. The P-38's aileron cables ran from the cockpit through the twin booms to the tail section, then forward again through a series of pulleys to the wing control surfaces. The system had a small amount of slack, maybe 3/8 of an inch, but that fraction of a second delay between stick input and aileron response was the difference between life and death in a tight turning fight. At high speeds, the delay didn't matter. At low speeds during hard maneuvers, it was lethal. 2 months earlier, McKenna had mentioned this to the engineering officer. The response: the slack was within specifications. Factory tolerances allowed for it. Adjusting it would void the aircraft warranty. No field mechanic had authorization to modify flight control systems. That required approval from Lockheed in California, 7,000 miles away. So McKenna broke the rules. He took a 6-inch piece of piano wire from a damaged aircraft, bent it into a Z-shape, and installed it as a tensioner on Hayes's left aileron cable. The modification took 8 minutes, added 0.4 pounds of tension, and eliminated the slack entirely. The inspection crew, focused on engine oil and ammunition, noticed nothing. McKenna said nothing. He watched Hayes taxi, take off, and disappear toward the Japanese fighters. What happened next 17 minutes would change the course of P-38 combat in the Pacific. The first pilot McKenna lost to a Zero was Lieutenant David Chun on July 9, 1943. Chun had been in theater only 3 weeks. McKenna worked on his aircraft each morning. They talked about California. Chun was from Sacramento, McKenna from Long Beach. Both had worked on cars before the war. Chun took off at 6:15 a.m. for a fighter sweep. 2 hours later, he returned with 3 bullet holes in his left boom and a story of a Zero getting inside his turn. He tried to follow the manual. Roll, dive, escape, but the aircraft felt slow, sluggish, delayed. Only his wingman's intervention saved him. McKenna examined the holes. Tight grouping, perfect deflection shooting. Chen's aircraft had delayed just long enough for the Zero to lead him perfectly. He never flew again. 3 weeks later, Chun was killed in another P-38 over Rabble, caught again in a turning fight. The second pilot was Captain William Morrison, a flight leader with 11 kills. On August 3rd, over Oro Bay, his flight intercepted 8 Zeros at 12,000 feet. Morrison scored a hit on one, but on the next pass 2 Zeros reversed on him. Radio traffic revealed his complaint. Controls felt mushy. The aircraft didn't respond fast enough. Morrison was shot down at 4,000 feet. His crew chief, Rodriguez from Texas, investigated thoroughly. Everything checked out. Engine, control surfaces, cables, all within spec. The official report, pilot error. Rodriguez didn't believe it. Neither did McKenna. By mid-August, McKenna had watched 17 pilots die. Some he knew well, others only briefly, but he had worked on every aircraft, signed off their maintenance logs, watched them taxi out, take off. The survivors reported the same experience. Sluggish response during hard maneuvering. Heavy fighter, big control surfaces, some delay expected, but this was abnormal. McKenna felt it in his hands while adjusting cables. That small slack caused every death he'd witnessed. He began listening to the cables during maintenance. There was a tone, a twang indicating slack. Loose cables sounded different from tight ones. Every P-38 on the line had cables that were technically within spec, but loose. He mentioned it to Rodriguez. Rodriguez asked if there was a solution. McKenna said, "Nothing official. Unofficially, yes, but it could get us court-martialed." The problem wasn't ignorance. Every briefing emphasized, never turn with a zero, use speed, altitude, hit and run. Hayes had followed every rule. On his third mission, he dove from altitude at 400 miles per hour, came in from the sun. The zero snap-rolled and dived. Hayes's P-38 felt like it moved through mud. He pulled out, climbed back. No shot fired. Fourth mission, worse. 2 zeros reversed on him. He rolled, but the aircraft responded too slowly. One diving zero hit him with a brief burst, didn't penetrate, but forced him home with smoking engines. Fifth mission. Hayes watched his wingman, Lieutenant Thomas Parker, die over Finchhofen. 2 zeros on his tail. Parker tried every maneuver, but the P-38 lagged. Hayes heard him panic on the radio, then silence. Parker's bed remained empty. His personal effects were packed and shipped home. Official cause, pilot error. McKenna had maintained Parker's aircraft. Everything was perfect. Parker was dead anyway. The smell of fuel, hot metal, and hydraulic fluid haunted McKenna each morning. Aircraft preparing for combat. Some returned, some didn't. He was always there, watching pilots climb into machines that couldn't respond fast enough to save them. On the evening of August 16th, Hayes found McKenna working on his assigned P-38. He asked, "Anything to make it roll faster?" Anything at all. Hayes didn't care about regulations. He just wanted a chance. McKenna saw the fear and desperation. A kid who knew he might die if something didn't change. McKenna said, "Come back in the morning. I'll see what I can do." Alone that night, McKenna worked in silence. The maintenance hangar smelled of oil and tropical humidity. Distant generators humming, insects buzzing against the lights. He pulled the inspection panel off the left boom. Inside, the aileron cable ran through pulleys toward the tail. He felt the slack. 3/8 of an inch. Wrong. The piano wire came from a salvaged P-38 that had ground-looped weeks earlier. McKenna bent it into a Z-shape, stiff and stubborn under the pliers. Cut his thumb once. Blood made the wire slippery. 8 minutes later, it was ready. He installed the tensioner in the tight space. One hand holding a flashlight, shoulder wedged against the metal. Dropped and retrieved a clevis pin. Heart pounding. Risk of court-martial, dishonorable discharge, prison, but Hayes would die without it. The wire was installed. No slack. Immediate response. McKenna replaced the panel, cleaned his tools, wiped the blood, and left at 1:15 a.m. The tropical night still, distant engines rumbling. At 6:30, he walked to the flight line. Engines roared, fueling and arming. Hayes climbed in and at 7:42, took off. McKenna watched as the P-38 joined formation, heading northwest toward Japanese airspace. And then he waited. The engagement began at 8:14 a.m. Hayes's flight of 4 P-38s intercepted 18 zeros at 13,000 feet over the Huan Gulf. The morning sun blazed behind them, perfectly positioned for a diving attack. Hayes flew number 3 in the formation, his hands gripping the controls, heart racing. The element leader called out the bounce. They rolled in. Hayes picked a 0 at the rear of the formation, dove from altitude, building speed to 380 miles per hour. The 0 grew in his gun sight, painted rising sun on the fuselage, the pilot's head visible through the canopy. Hayes pressed the trigger. 4.50 caliber machine guns and a single 20mm cannon roared. Tracers streaked outward, most missing, a few sparks hitting the wing. The 0 snap-rolled right and dove. Hayes followed. Then it happened. The P-38 responded instantly.
No delay. No sluggishness.
The stick moved, and the aircraft obeyed immediately. Hayes had never felt anything like it. It was as if the airplane had been waiting for his command, executing the moment he demanded. He rolled 90 degrees in what felt like half the normal time. Nose down. Lead 0 in sight. He fired again. 3-second burst. Rounds climbed the fuselage from tail to cockpit. The engine exploded. Pieces of wing, fuselage, and cockpit debris tumbled downward, trailing black smoke. 1 kill. Hayes' first. No time to celebrate. 3 zeros diving from above. His wingman called it out. Hayes looked up. 3 adversaries, descending in a shallow dive, approaching fast. Revenge-seeking, furious. He shoved the throttles forward, tried to climb. Too slow. They'd be on him in seconds. Instinct screamed, climb, run. But doctrine meant dying. He rolled hard left and pulled. The P-38 snapped around like a different aircraft. Nose came through the horizon. Lead 0 turning to follow, exposed, unprepared for Hayes' counter. He pulled lead, fired again. Left wing of the 0 folded. Aircraft tumbled. 1 kill. Another 0 tried to scissor, alternating turns to force and overshoot. Hayes stayed with him. Every reversal, the P-38 responded instantly. No lag. Every maneuver precise, like a well-trained partner anticipating his moves. Another 0 reversed too hard, lost speed. Hayes got inside the turn, close range, 200 feet. Fired. 0 came apart. Debris passed the canopy. P-38 shuddered as fragments hit the right boom. 3 kills. The 4th 0 fled. Hayes did not pursue. Low on fuel, low on ammo, he climbed to reform with the remaining flight. Entire engagement lasted 7 minutes. When Hayes landed at Dobodura at 9:03 a.m., McKenna was waiting. Hayes shut down the engines, climbed out, hands shaking, sweat soaking his flight suit. He walked straight to McKenna and said 2 words. It worked. Unbeknownst to them, 6 other pilots had observed the engagement from altitude. Captain Frank Mitchell, flight leader in the 475th Fighter Group, watched from 15,000 feet. Hayes' P-38 rolled faster than any Lightning he had ever seen, snapped through maneuvers as if it weighed half what it should. Mitchell knew every pilot in theater. Hayes was skilled, but not that skilled. Something had changed. After landing, Mitchell tracked Hayes down in the debriefing room. Hands still shaking, adrenaline high, 3 confirmed kills. Mitchell asked what was different. Hayes didn't know. Simply that the airplane responded faster. Mitchell then asked about maintenance. Hayes mentioned McKenna. 2 hours later, Mitchell found McKenna in the hangar. Grease-blackened hands, coveralls stained with hydraulic fluid, working on another P-38. Mitchell asked directly, "What did you do to Hayes' aircraft?" McKenna told him, "The piano wire tensioner, cable modification, unauthorized change to the flight control system." Mitchell listened quietly. When McKenna finished, Mitchell asked if he could have the same modification for his P-38. McKenna said yes, but warned of the risks. Unapproved, untested, and potentially dangerous. Mitchell didn't care. He'd lost 4 pilots in the past month to turning fights they couldn't escape. If this gave them a chance, regulations could wait. That evening, McKenna modified Mitchell's P-38. Same piano wire tensioner, same installation method. Mitchell flew the next morning, returned ecstatic. "The airplane rolls like a fighter, not a truck," he told his wingman. Word spread through whispers among pilots and crew chiefs. Some refused, citing regulations. Others wanted it. McKenna showed them. Cut the piano wire, bend into Z-shape, install as inline tensioner, 8 minutes, transformative. By August 20th, 9 aircraft bore the modification. Pilots returned from missions with improved performance and kills. Lieutenant James Watkins, crew chief with the 49th Fighter Group at Gusap, heard the story from a pilot transferred from Dobodura. Skeptical, he tried it on 1 aircraft. The pilot returned with his first kill in 8 weeks. Watkins modified for more planes. Crew chiefs across the 49th followed suit. By early September, roughly 40 P-38s in New Guinea had the modification. Engineering officers noticed improvements but couldn't identify why. Cable tensions measured within spec. Tensioners removed before inspections, replaced afterward. Pilots and mechanics knew. No official documentation, no approval, but the kill ratio shifted. In July, American pilots lost 2 P-38s for every 0 destroyed. By August, ratio 1.3 to 1. By September, nearly even. Something had changed, imperceptibly but decisively. Japanese pilots noticed first in late August. Reports from the 11th Air Fleet described P-38s rolling faster, reversing more quickly, maneuvers they had exploited for months failing unexpectedly. Lieutenant Commander Saburo Sakai, Japan's top ace with 64 confirmed kills, engaged a P-38 over Waiwak on September 3, 1943. Standard tactic: lure the American into a turning fight, snap back to get inside his radius. But the P-38 rolled faster than it should. Sakai barely avoided a head-on collision. American guns were on him. He dove away, confused. Other experienced Japanese pilots reported similar encounters. The Americans weren't flying differently, they were still using the same tactics. But their aircraft responded faster, fractionally, yet decisively. Japanese intelligence examined wreckage from downed P-38s. Engines same, armament same, no visible modifications. They didn't know about the hidden piano wire inside the boom. Even if discovered, purpose unclear. Minor modification, major consequences. By mid-September, Japanese losses escalated. For 2 years, 0 pilots had dominated turning fights. Confidence breaking down. Pilots hesitant, unsure. Some abandoned traditional tactics, flying hit and run like P-38s, but losing maneuverability advantage. Others became reckless, closing to shorter ranges, taking risks, often dying faster. Several experienced aces killed using tactics that had worked in July. The fundamental problem: fighting an invisible modification, unable to counter what they could not see. By the end of September, the 11th Air Fleet had lost 38 fighters in P-38 engagements. American losses, 22. Ratio reversed. First time in Pacific War, P-38s achieving better than 1-to-1 kill ratio. Japanese command ordered pilots to avoid P-38s unless significantly outnumbering them. A turning point. The hunter became the hunted. And it all began with a piece of 6-inch piano wire, unauthorized, unapproved. The modification never became official during the war. Army Air Force Engineering Command learned of it in October 1943 when an inspector noticed inconsistent cable tension readings. Investigation traced discrepancies to piano wire tensioners. Report sent up the chain, 3 weeks of debate. Modification violated regulations but improved survivability. Question: punish the mechanics or quietly approve after the fact? In November, Lockheed sent an engineering team to New Guinea. Tests confirmed the modification's safety and effectiveness. Should have been part of the original design. Lockheed integrated a similar system into the P-38J model, entering production December 1943. McKenna received no official credit, no commendation, no recognition. Documentation attributed improvement to engineering analysis. His name absent. Hayes survived the war. 63 combat missions, 11 Japanese aircraft destroyed. Returned to Iowa in 1945. Married his high school sweetheart. For children. Crop duster for 37 years. Every August 17th, he called McKenna to thank him. Mitchell survived as well. Became squadron commander. Led through the Philippines campaign. Shot down 16 aircraft. retired as colonel in 1963, told the story to every young maintenance officer he supervised, ensuring enlisted mechanics' ingenuity was recognized. McKenna stayed in the Army Air Force until 1946, returned to California, resumed working on cars, opened a garage in Long Beach in 1948. 42 years of engine work. Never spoke much of the war. Simply said, "I was a mechanic, fixed airplanes." In 1991, a military historian researching P-38 modifications discovered references to the piano wire tensioner in New Guinea maintenance logs. Tracked McKenna, then 73, still part-time in his garage. Confirmed the story. Not special, just necessary. Historian estimated the modification saved 80 to 100 lives based on squadron survival rates. McKenna never counted. Remembered only the pilots who returned: Hayes, Mitchell, Watkins, the others. McKenna died in 2006 at 88, buried in Pacific View Memorial Park, California. Obituary noted World War II aircraft mechanic service. No mention of piano wire tensioner. No recognition of lives saved. No mention of braking regulations. Garage remains, under different ownership, but in the back office. Faded photograph of young McKenna next to a P-38 Lightning. August 1943, New Guinea. A silent testament to wartime innovation. This is how innovation happens in war. Not through committees, not through official approval, but through sergeants and mechanics who see a problem, find a solution, and act without permission to save lives. The war in the Pacific continued, brutal and relentless. Every day, pilots climbed into P-38 Lightnings, faced the morning sun, and flew into the unknown. But thanks to McKenna's quiet ingenuity, the balance of power was shifting. Pilots who had previously been outmaneuvered by the Agile Zero now had a fighting chance. That small, almost invisible modification, the 6-inch piece of piano wire bent into a Z, was changing history one engagement at a time. By October 1943, the results were undeniable. Squadrons with modified P-38s saw kill ratios improve dramatically. Pilots survived encounters that, just months before, would have been fatal. The morale among the American pilots soared. Confidence returned, not reckless confidence, but measured, hard-earned confidence. They knew their aircraft would respond instantly, without hesitation. That split-second difference was all it took to stay alive. Lieutenant Robert Hayes continued to fly with the modified P-38. Over the next few months, he completed 63 missions, downed 11 Japanese aircraft, and became a model of skill and determination. Each engagement reinforced what he had felt on August 17th. The airplane responded as if it anticipated his every move. The modification transformed a machine into a seamless extension of the pilot himself. Meanwhile, McKenna remained in the shadows. To the Army Air Force, he was just a mechanic, dedicated, precise, competent, but unremarkable. He didn't seek recognition. He never spoke of the modification. His work saved lives, changed the outcomes of aerial engagements, and disrupted Japanese tactics, yet the official records bore no trace of his contribution. His innovation, like so many acts of unsung heroism during the war, existed only in the memories of those who survived. Mitchell, now flying with a full squadron of modified P-38s, saw firsthand how the change rippled through every mission. Experienced pilots who had been cautious, hesitant even, now attacked with renewed effectiveness. Wingmen coordinated with precision, relying on the instantaneous control of their aircraft to execute complex maneuvers. Dogfights became more balanced. Pilots who once felt powerless now had an edge. The lessons of that single night in August, when McKenna bent the piano wire, spread organically through the ranks. Knowledge traveled through crew chiefs, whispered among pilots, and became common practice without any official sanction. Back at Dobodura airfield, McKenna continued his routine, inspecting aircraft, checking engines, and performing maintenance with meticulous care. Each inspection was a delicate dance of precision and intuition. He could hear the subtle tone of the cables when plucked, distinguish between taut and slack, anticipate potential failures before they occurred. Every flight, every mission, every pilot's life depended on his understanding of the machine, his ability to correct what the official manuals overlooked. Stories of the modified P-38s reached the highest levels of the 5th Air Force. Commanders noticed that missions were returning with higher success rates. American losses were declining, enemy losses rising. Pilots spoke of improved maneuverability, quicker response, and deadly effectiveness in combat. But the mechanic's secret remained safe. No official documentation, no engineering reports, no approval. The difference was visible only in the sky and on the combat reports filed by grateful pilots. In New Guinea, the Japanese pilots grew increasingly wary. Encounters that had been predictable became unpredictable. Zeros, long considered invincible in turning fights, found themselves outmaneuvered. Experienced aces reported strange, unexplainable behavior. American P-38s rolling faster, reversing more quickly, executing maneuvers with impossible precision. Morale among the Japanese pilots faltered. Confusion replaced confidence. They couldn't calculate the timing, couldn't anticipate the American response. Their traditional tactics failed repeatedly. Lieutenant Commander Saburo Sakai, the famed Japanese ace, confronted the phenomenon firsthand. On multiple occasions, he engaged American P-38s only to find them responding faster than any aircraft he had previously encountered. The timing was wrong. The maneuvers were precise. His attacks, once flawless, now failed. Reports circulated through the 11th Air Fleet. The Americans were flying differently, but how? The answer eluded them. Every reconnaissance of downed P-38s revealed no changes. Engines were standard, armament unchanged, airframes intact. The Japanese could not detect the invisible hand that had altered the fight. By late September, the strategic implications were clear. Japanese command issued new orders. Avoid engaging P-38s unless numerically superior. The hunter had become the hunted. For the first time in the Pacific War, American pilots were dictating the terms of engagement. Control of the sky had shifted, not through new technology, but through the ingenuity of a single mechanic who understood the machines better than anyone else. The impact extended beyond immediate combat results. The psychological effect on both sides was profound. American pilots flew with renewed courage. They trusted their aircraft and their instincts. Japanese pilots, trained for domination in turning fights, hesitated, second-guessed maneuvers, and suffered losses that shook their confidence. The modification did not merely improve performance, it altered the mental calculus of warfare. The sky was no longer the domain of one side. Each engagement became a contest of skill, timing, and split-second decision-making. Despite the widespread effect of his work, McKenna remained largely anonymous. He returned to California after the war, opening his garage in Long Beach in 1948. There, he worked on engines for 42 years, fixing cars, motorcycles, and airplanes. Customers saw a dedicated mechanic. Few knew of the man who had saved scores of lives, changed the course of aerial combat, and disrupted the tactics of a feared enemy. McKenna himself rarely spoke of the war. When pressed, he would simply say, "I was a mechanic, fixed airplanes." No grandiose tales, no claims of heroism. The story of the piano wire tensioner might have faded entirely if not for the persistence of historians and veterans. In 1991, a military historian researching P-38 modifications unearthed maintenance logs from New Guinea. The logs referenced the unauthorized tensioners, including McKenna's handwritten notes. Through diligent investigation, the historian tracked down McKenna, then 73, still working in his garage. McKenna confirmed the story, emphasizing that it was not heroic, it was necessary. The pilots had been dying, and something needed to be done. Estimates suggested that the modification saved between 80 and 100 American pilots' lives. McKenna did not quantify the impact. For him, it was about the individuals who returned: Hayes, Mitchell, Watkins, and the others. Each life saved was a victory. Each mission returned safely, a testament to the careful, quiet work done in the shadow of regulations. Hayes never forgot what McKenna had done. After the war, he married, raised children, and lived a life rooted in the peaceful rhythms of Iowa. Yet every August 17th, he would call McKenna to thank him. The anniversary of that first mission, that critical day when survival hinged on a small, bent piece of piano wire, became a private commemoration between pilot and mechanic. A reminder that heroism often exists in the quietest acts, unseen by the world. Mitchell, too, carried the story forward. As a squadron commander, he shared McKenna's ingenuity with every young maintenance officer he supervised. The lesson was clear: innovation does not always come from engineers or official directives. Sometimes it comes from those who see a problem, understand it deeply, and act decisively, even at personal risk. Mitchell made sure that future generations of mechanics understood that survival and victory in war often depended on courage in the shadows. The legacy of McKenna's work extended beyond the Pacific theater. Lessons learned from the P-38 modifications informed maintenance procedures, engineering approaches, and pilot training long after the war ended. The principle was simple: small, thoughtful interventions, guided by experience and insight, could have profound effects on performance and survival. McKenna's tensioner demonstrated that practical innovation, applied at the right moment, could outweigh formal doctrine, committee decisions, and theoretical specifications. In the years after World War II, McKenna lived a quiet life, never seeking fame. He returned to Long Beach, worked on cars, and occasionally restored aircraft for private collectors. Friends knew him as meticulous, precise, and dedicated. Few understood the full scope of his contribution to the war effort. Even in the late 20th century, the true story of the piano wire tensioner was largely unknown outside of specialized historical circles. When McKenna passed away in 2006 at the age of 88, he was buried in Pacific View Memorial Park in California. His obituary noted his service as a World War II aircraft mechanic, but made no mention of the piano wire tensioner, the lives saved, or the pivotal change in P-38 performance that had altered aerial combat in the Pacific. The recognition he deserved remained unofficial, quietly honored only by the pilots whose lives he had saved. Yet the story endured, passed down through the testimonies of veterans, historians, and the occasional maintenance officer inspired by Mitchell's accounts. In Long Beach, the garage he opened remains in operation, a living relic of his life's work. In the back office, a faded photograph hangs. A young mechanic in coveralls, standing beside a P-38 Lightning in August 1943, New Guinea. The image is more than a photo. It is a testament to the power of human ingenuity, courage, and the quiet, often invisible acts that shape history. McKenna's story serves as a reminder that innovation in war is not solely about new weapons, large-scale strategies, or bureaucratic approval. Often, it is about understanding the tools, observing their limitations, and having the courage to act when lives are at stake. The piano wire tensioner was a small, nearly invisible solution, but it changed the course of battles, saved dozens of lives, and shifted the psychological dynamics of aerial warfare. For the pilots of the 475th and 49th Fighter Groups, and countless others, McKenna's intervention meant more than survival. It meant the opportunity to fight effectively, to protect comrades, and to return home. Each successful mission reinforced the lessons learned that August night, when McKenna, alone in the maintenance hangar, recognized a problem and implemented a solution without hesitation. As history records the wars and battles, the names of sergeants, mechanics, and the quiet problem solvers are often lost. But their actions ripple outward, shaping outcomes in ways no official report can fully capture. McKenna's piano wire tensioner is a testament to that truth. It is a story of courage, intelligence, and dedication, proof that heroism often exists where the world does not expect it, in the silent, meticulous hands of those who understand that every detail matters. Today, the story is preserved in archives, in veterans' recollections, and in the lessons taught to future generations of mechanics and pilots. It serves as both a historical account and a moral lesson. Sometimes, the best solutions come not from committees or official channels, but from those willing to see a problem clearly and take decisive action, regardless of the risk. The legacy of Technical Sergeant James McKenna, Lieutenant Robert Hayes, and the P-38 Lightning in New Guinea remains a profound chapter in the history of aviation and World War II. It illustrates that innovation and bravery often occur away from the limelight, in moments of quiet determination, and with tools as simple as a piece of piano wire. It reminds us that history is not only written by generals and politicians, but also by those who act decisively in the face of danger, using their knowledge, skill, and courage to save lives and alter outcomes. And so, the story endures, not as a tale of glory or recognition, but as a testament to the quiet heroism that shapes history, often unseen, often uncredited, but undeniably impactful. McKenna's life, his work, and his courage remain embedded in every P-38 that ever took to the skies, in every pilot who survived because of his ingenuity, and in every lesson passed down through the decades. If the story resonates, remember that heroism comes in many forms, often unrecognized, often invisible. And for those who dare to innovate, to act when it matters most, history remembers in ways that official records never could.